Hey, it's David. Let's deal with the spongy brakes on the bike. Spongy brakes, when you don't have a firm bite on the brake lever but it's sort of squishy or spongy, most often caused by having air in the system. Sometimes it can be caused by water getting into the brake fluid. Air is very squashy. Water is a little bit more squashy, and certainly more squashy than brake fluid to a certain degree. So it's most likely air. So if you squeeze, you're squashing the air with the pressure. That's why it's spongy. If you haven't changed your brake fluid recently, and it should be at least every 2 years, then you might want to think about actually bleeding through the system and replacing the old fluid with new fluid and see if that cures your problem. Because whilst you're bleeding it, you might actually get rid of the air at the same time. So that's the starting point. You've bled the system through, you've got all the air out that you can get out of it, and you've pumped enough fluid through that you're confident you've replaced all of the old fluid. What we've got here is we've got fluid in this piece of tube and we have an air bubble. Now watch that air bubble as I pump some more fluid through the system. But what you saw was the air bubble pumped down, but it only pumped this far, down to about here, because that's all you can pump through with one pump on the lever. So the moment that I shut this off, the air bubble just rose back up to the highest point in the pipe. The issue is that when you're doing a normal bleed using the actual brake lever, you can only push about 4 to 6 inches of fluid through the line at any one time. So you'll squeeze, get it tight, crack off, lever comes in, close. That's about 4 to 6 inches of fluid. Now when you've got a loop over your front wheel, that's more than 4 to 6 inches. And what will happen is at the top there will be some air bubbles. They'll sit there, you'll pump through 4 to 6 inches and it'll get down and it'll almost reach your caliper, but then it won't, and then you close off the bleed and the air just flows back to the top. So you're back to stage 1, and you can stay there all day pumping through. It's not going to happen. So what are your strategies? The first one is to actually keep pumping the lever. Now this is contrary to normal advice. If you let go of the lever, you risk pulling air back into the actual caliper. But if you're past the point when there's any air coming through and you've got a decent amount of brake fluid in your drain line, so long as you made sure your master cylinder is full before you do this, you can actually multiple squeeze the lever and keep pushing fluid through. And that will mean you may be able to get enough through that it will push the air out through the caliper and out into your drain system, and you should see it come through if you do. Now there is a risk that you'll pump the master cylinder dry whilst you're doing this, but it's not such a big issue, because all you're going to do is you're going to introduce some air into the top of your brake line, and that's easy to get rid of. Just put some fluid back in and pump the lever gently, just like I show you in my how to get air out of your braking system or hydraulic system video. Assuming that doesn't work, or you just want to try something different, then you can either force more liquid through, or you can suck it through the system. So what some people do is they reverse bleed. Now how this works is you take a big syringe that you can fit a hose to that's going to be the same size as fitting your caliper. You fill it full of fluid, you attach it to the caliper, you crack open the caliper and you squeeze that syringe in and force quite a bit of fluid through, and that'll be enough to push that again, all the air all the way through and out of the other caliper. So you're squeezing it in one, draining it out the other, or just allowing it to flow up the system. It doesn't really matter which way you go. But bear in mind, if you do this and the fluid comes up into your master cylinder, it could overflow, and if you're using dot floor, it'll be all over your paintwork, and that will make a mess of your paintwork. So careful with that one. The alternative is to use the syringe and actually suck it. Instead of forcing it in, you actually suck it out, and so suck the fluid through the line. All very much the same principle. But there is an alternative, and that is to use the air bleeding technique that I like, and it's the one that I tend to use, and that's the one that says air goes up, fluid goes down, and that's what I'm going to show you now. What I've done is I've taken the other caliper off. I've put a plate between the brake pads so that they don't move out too far and pop the pistons out, and I've held that caliper up. I've bled the brakes a bit more. I've opened the valve and allowed fluid through. So even though I thought I'd got the air out of this loop, I still had spongy brakes. So I've taken this off and I've moved it round to this side. Now I've still got a loop here where it goes down. Having now bled this a bit more, I got quite a bit more air through, and the lever's feeling a little bit better. That's the right hand caliper running uphill into here. So I've taken this caliper off as well because I just couldn't eliminate this bend. Now that's running through there, and any air will be coming up into the caliper and into this, which is running. I need to lower this down and change the angle a little bit, up through there. That gives me braking pressure. It's topped up. So what I'm going to do is put the cap on. I'm going to tie this lever shut, and I'm going to leave it overnight. So follow the air. Fluid goes down, air goes up. So if you've got a spongy system, especially if you've got dual calipers, help the air on its way. Allow it to flow uphill and give it a chance, and it will. So let's see what this is going to be like in the morning. Okay, so it's next morning, and the brake is still firm after I've bungeed it back overnight. So I've put the calipers back on, and I've now got good firm pressure. Now what I am going to do is just to bleed the front caliper before I finish, because that was part of the chain of getting the air out. So it's possible that as well as running up the pipe to the master cylinder, a little bit of air has actually gone up into the caliper. So I'm just going to do a quick bleed of the caliper, just a few strokes just to pump a bit of brake fluid through. And there was a little air bubble. So if you do get spongy brakes, you've just got air in it, and I've given you some strategies as to how to get that out. So no reason at all why this won't work for you. So thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you guys again soon.